Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Intentional Life Summit. I'm your co-host, Diana Yoakley, and I'm so delighted to introduce you to our next speaker. I have here with me Diane Boden. Welcome, Diane. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm really happy to be a part of this. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. Yes, we're delighted to have you because you're an expert on rational decluttering.
Yep.
So, Diane Boden is the voice behind the top rated podcast, Minimalist Moms. Through her show, Diane shares her personal experiences and interviews inspiring guests who offer insights and tips on living a fulfilling life with less. Diane's expertise and messages have been sought out by various other podcasts, including The Spillover with Alex Clark, 1000 Hours Outside, The Mom Hour, and more. In addition to her successful podcast, Diane has also authored a book released in March 2021. Her words and advice have impacted countless individuals and families looking to simplify their lives and find more meaning in the things that matter most. And Diane resides in Columbus, Ohio with her husband and 3 children. So I'm so glad that you're here today.
Yeah, like I said, I'm excited to be a part of this and hopefully make minimalism more approachable to the everyday person because I do think that when people hear minimalism, it's a really scary term. And in certain ways, I'm like, am I really a minimalist these days? Because I just feel like I live an intentional lifestyle. But maybe I feel that way because I've gotten rid of so many things at this point that I am more focused on my mind and my relationships and my schedules, like doing the mental side of
Mhm.
decluttering. But I do think that just before we even get into it, that minimalism is approachable. You can live with less than you think. I'm sure I'll say that again before this episode or before this interview is over. But just listen in and take a few of these tips away because I think it'll help
Yeah.
simplify your life a little bit better.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the term minimalist can be a little deceiving because it sounds like you're taking away, you're subtracting.
Yeah.
Whereas with this idea of minimalizing, there's another part of the equation. The first part is to take away things that are not important. The second part is to do addition, is to add more time, add more space, add more joy, add more of the things that are important to you. So
Mhm.
I don't know if that term minimalism really captures that, but I love how you said with intention, which that's what it's all about in this summit. We're talking about like what is important to you as a parent, what's important to you as a family, and how can decluttering help you create more time and space um, for the things that you want more of in your life, and remove the things that you would like to get rid of.
Mhm.
So with that, I'd love for you to kind of dive into when you say rational decluttering, what do you mean with that term?
So, like I said, I think that I'm to the point where I've gotten rid of the tangible things in my home. And I do think decluttering, especially with young kids, is a process that you are constantly going to need to stay on top of. All that to say, I think that some people just start whittling the things down, which is great. But then it's once you get to that next stage that it's really hard to get rid of things if you have sentimental attachment, if you're not like rational and honest with yourself. And I think that's where the hard work begins. You can easily go into a bathroom and pull everything out, live without it for 30 days, and then slowly bring back in what you need and use in there. But when you address your children's clothing that they've grown out of, or pictures from college, high school, like your parents' clothing that, or a relative that may have passed, that is challenging. And or this is a really hard one for women, clothes you may not fit into anymore. But when we aren't honest with ourselves, when we aren't rational about the like who we are in the now and not living for our future self or our past self, I just think that it's a step that can't be overlooked because the mind is a really powerful thing that can help us or harm us. And so that's kind of my approach, just being rational.
Yeah, and being more so when you're kind of saying rational, it's more about using more of a logical side of our brain versus the
Yeah.
more emotional side that with the sentimental stuff, especially like you said, it's a little harder. So how do we remain rational when we're moving through these sentimental items? And maybe before we get into that, can you list off some kind of key areas? You did list a couple of things like clothing for women, um, yeah,
Baby
and maybe I wonder
clothes.
if you could like just even go up from like room to room, maybe
Yeah,
some like the top two per room, or maybe even rooms that would be, because I'm thinking about like decluttering, I'm thinking by room because
sure.
there's certain things in different rooms. Like a kitchen may not be as critical in
Sure.
terms
And
of.
that might be a great, I always say bathroom first, kitchen second, because you want to
Mhm.
stay, like, you want to build the momentum and get those small wins under your belt. But
Yeah.
I think being rational isn't just about sentimentality, as you're saying that. It could be this is one thing that people hold on to. They hold on to like pamphlets that are like how-to manuals for the
Yeah.
juicer or the blender. And it's like all that information is available online. Like, why are you storing all of these manuals, taking up precious space? Because a lot of homes, like, we're limited with the counter space that we have or storage space. And also, it's really nice. We moved recently, and it's really nice to just have cabinets that have nothing in them. And it's kind of fun because my
Yeah.
kids can play and like use those cabinets if they want to, like for an
Hmm.
activity for the day. Or it's just nice to know, like, there's nothing in here and I don't have to worry about it, because everything you own is inventory in your space that you have to keep track of. And it's a mental weight that you don't necessarily need. So again, yes, going through the kitchen, it might just be those manuals or something that you've spent money on. Like maybe it is the juicer that you don't use. And it's like, okay, am I living for this future self that at some point is going to be juicing? And maybe someone in your life wants to borrow that and is like, hey, I'm in my season of juicing, I'd like to borrow that from you. And so you can, I think that that helps me work through some of these emotional attachments that I have to my things, is when I can see something have a new life and it doesn't feel like it's wasted. But I think the weight of feeling the wastefulness and being frivolous with our money,
Hmm.
especially if we're struggling with money, that can be really hard to let go. But the thing is, the money isn't wasted in the moment when you decide to get rid of it. It was already spent. So use that as anecdotal evidence to say, going into the future, I'm not going to do that again. This was a learning experience. And again, I prefer to try and get rid of things if I can, to friends or to donations, to where I'm not just like
Hmm.
throwing it away. And then that does feel like
Yeah.
a little bit heavier. But again, it's not untrue. So I think that sometimes we just don't want to face the truth of our decisions, but it's really confronting that helps you make better decisions in the future.
Hmm.
Oh, but
Yeah. Yeah.
we can go through the house. I'm trying to think, like I said, the manuals or the things that you've spent money on, and this could be applicable to anywhere. In your kids' rooms, it's toys that they may have grown out of, or toys that they've grown out of, clothes or toys that they don't use, or toys that they never used. I think one of the things that I still have not decluttered, wooden blocks. I so badly wanted my kids to use wooden blocks.
Yeah.
They're so aesthetically pleasing and they were expensive. And no one ever cared about the wooden blocks, but they're in the room still because I'm like, maybe one day. And that's something that I struggle to
Yeah.
get rid of. So I don't also think that you're ever going to reach like
Yeah.
peak nirvana and like have overcome all of it. Some people are more ruthless than others, but I do think that like a little bit of that is what keeps us human. So
Yeah, yeah, and when we're thinking about like items, going through items that feel sentimental, I like how you mentioned like maybe considering giving it as a gift to someone else, passing it along, so it doesn't feel like you're like ripping it from your soul and just discarding
yeah.
it, right? Because it has this like almost like there's an attachment there, and so when you transfer that attachment to a person you care about or somebody that you know will benefit from it, it
Mhm.
doesn't seem so severe. But is there
Yeah.
like a process of how you would kind of work through that yourself? Is there questions you would ask, or, and I know there's like, the Marie Kondo method or whatever, like where you
Joy.
like
Yeah.
wish the thing goodbye and like thank you for the service. Is there anything kind of like that emotionally that we want to kind of be aware of and conscious of as we're going through these more
Yeah.
sentimental emotional items to separate from them a little bit easier
So
maybe?
I'm a bit of a verbal processor, if you haven't already learned that about me in this conversation. But I love to just share my emotions with my friends, like have a good friend that can come over and you can verbally process with her or him or her if need be. I also like writing things down and just again, I feel like my big thing, I'm in my mid 30s now, and my big thing is like time's going to pass anyway. So like I just want to address the things now because I don't want to carry this into my future. Like time is short and it's limited. I'm not even guaranteed tomorrow. So like, why would I not address the thing? So again, if you can just like write down maybe the pain points in your home, like wooden blocks would definitely go on there. Um, this is just like a side like tangent of what you can do with those sentimental items that you choose not to declutter. Each of my family members has a larger box that I got from the Container Store. I don't know. We'll just say they're about 4 gallon boxes, but we each have
Mhm.
one. And that's where like the artwork that's really special, or like in mine, I have letters from my grandma. I have a few things from our wedding. I went through wedding cards recently and I got rid of everything that was just kind of generic, like happy wedding day. And there's a
Yeah.
few that I kept that were really special messages that are in there as well. Just a few like mementos from my husband and I started dating. I have my garter in there from our wedding. So it's just like that's my box. It's a visual boundary to say like you can fill it, and then if it starts to become overfilled, that's when you start sorting through and saying like maybe I don't need as much of this as I thought, because that entire box of wedding cards was in there at one point. And I was like, no,
Uh-huh.
I think I'm ready to detach. And I also think there's something to be said about revisiting something that has felt hard in the past. So with my daughter, she will be 10 next month. And it was really hard when I first started going through her baby clothes, because it just felt like, oh my gosh, is this really like the only girl I'll have? Is this my like was she, like I'm never gonna have a baby again? But then when you go back to it and revisit, you're like, okay, I can get rid of a little bit more. Okay, I can get rid of a little bit more. So that I feel like that
Mhm.
exposure therapy of sorts
Mhm.
is really helpful as well. I'm trying to remember what your original question was, but I know I veered a little bit.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good approach. Kind of, I was kind of wondering about the mental process, and it
Mhm.
sounds like, from a kind of a parent emotion coaching perspective, it sounds to me maybe like we have big emotions coming up around these items that are important to us, and with emotions, if we don't feel them, they're going to linger around longer. So, like for
Mhm.
example, maybe with the wooden blocks, I wonder if there's some grief there
Yeah.
around like I had really wanted, I wished, and I didn't get it. Like they didn't enjoy them. And maybe like a part of us is holding on to like that grief still,
Mhm.
but we know to process grief, we just need to sit with it and feel it. And like you said,
Mhm.
like verbally, whether we're sharing with somebody or
Mhm.
um, sharing our emotional experience, that kind of helps us process it and let it go. So I love that process of like revisiting, and some emotions are more powerful than others, some are deeper than others. And so when you
Mhm.
revisit the sentimental box, you can kind of see what you've processed a little bit more and what you can kind of make peace with, because it's not such a
Well,
powerful grip on you as
yeah.
much.
And it's funny because now talking through it, I'm like, that's stupid. Why am I keeping these blocks? I might actually just go get rid of them today now that we're talking about it. Cause I'm like, I've kept those for too long. They really haven't played with them. So it makes sense. But also, I think that some of our emotions can be negative emotions as well. So I had like a season in high school that I didn't love, and I got rid of all those pictures because it's like, why am I keeping this reminder again, or like a smaller size, like a that you don't fit into anymore? Why are we keeping that negativity around as well? Like
Uh-huh.
again, the time has passed, it's in the past, like just move on. And some people might be like, well, maybe you'll want to see those pictures again from high school. And it's like, I don't. I'm 35, 36. I'm good. Like I remember it. I
Yeah.
lived through it. I don't necessarily want other people to see it. I think there's enough pictures that have solidified my life that will be kept around that like show the things that I want remembered about me when I pass.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I would say don't keep reminders around of things that are also painful. And
Mm.
again, if you have to sort through that, and this could be a bigger conversation where you said it might be deeper than we even realize, but these memories that are tied to the item, like the item is a representation of the memory, it's not the memory
Yeah.
itself. And so I think we also
Right.
have to be rational when it comes to that of getting rid of this item doesn't mean I'm getting rid of that stays with me.
Right. And especially like, um, like things from loved ones, like you said. It's
Mhm.
like just because I'm getting rid of this thing doesn't mean I'm getting rid of this loved one.
Yeah.
Like I still remember them. I know who they are, and maybe this was a visual cue, but then it's like, well, how many visual cues of them do you need and where do you need them? Does it need to be like all over your house, or does it need to be just like a digital picture of the item,
Mhm.
like, um
like a scrapbook
So
of the
yeah,
items. If you have a
yeah,
parent that passed away, you could definitely either in your yearly scrapbook, or you could make a scrapbook of the items. Or if you have jewelry or something that was really special, like use it up, like use it and display it, and use your grandmother's china. Don't just have it in the cabinet. That's another thing that seems wasteful to me and just can be clutter, is the stuff that we never use. It's like these museums that we've cultivated in our house, because we're like, oh, that's precious. But it's like, oh, it is precious. And that's why I'm going to use it. And you may break one, you may break a piece, but at least it's being used up. And I just also
yeah,
think, like, if you want to get kind of like pulling out and just kind of be morbid with it, like we're all going to die at some point. And so
right,
it's
right.
like, I don't want that weight of what I'm keeping of my parents passed down to my daughter. So what? She's going to have to navigate that, and she's going to probably get rid of it because her emotional attachment to them is not nearly as much as me. And I don't want to do that to her because she's already going to be grieving me. And it's like, I don't want to
Hmm.
pass that on to her. So then what? It's just this cyclical thing that goes down the line until someone just tosses everything. So it's like, no, we're grown-ups. Things are hard. You can move through it. You're strong. And I just personally don't want the weight of my things keeping me from the freedom of just existing in my house that is my refuge.
Yeah,
Like that's what our
yeah.
spaces are. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I love that point. And it almost makes me think of like culturally, maybe we have this like this thing ingrained in us that our ancestors deserve the respect and the
yeah.
things that they've given us, like the side table or like whatever. Like we can't get rid of that because that would be like, dishonor, like almost not a dishonor directly, but more like I guess you just don't care. You're so selfish, like right? Like you just get rid of all the evidence of your ancestors. But what you're saying is um, ultimately your ancestors are part of your genetics, right? For one,
Yeah.
and they're in your memories. And also, this is your life. Like,
Yeah.
if you're constantly people pleasing, even if
Mhm.
they're dead,
Yeah.
right? It
Yeah.
really, it's like a weight you're at, and it's a role modeling for your kids as well, right? Like, what are you
Yeah.
teaching them that in order to respect their elders, they have to keep all the stuff the elders have sent them, and
Mhm.
this kind of leads me into like even when grandparents tend to overbuy toys for kids,
Mhm.
kind of that same thing of like, well, you can't just throw that away. That would be disrespectful or just,
Yeah.
dishonor or whatever. So maybe
Yeah.
we can kind of transition into that as well when things are coming in from people
Yeah.
you care about, but it's like, this is not this doesn't serve my intentional lifestyle. And
Yeah.
how do I, yeah, manage that?
Well, and I do want to clarify, like I absolutely love antiques. Our house is from
Yeah.
1830, so I definitely have some antiques around, and I just think you can't keep it all. So what's the
Yeah.
most precious thing? Most precious thing, most special precious thing.
Yeah.
Um, what is, yeah, and have that on display. I'm not saying like completely ice out the ancestors and get rid of all their stuff. I'm just saying it's not of all the same importance, and you know
Right.
that. And so just be honest with yourselves about the things that are the most important and special. And again, like passing things down to like other friends or family members that can use it is a really great way to honor memories as well. But in regards to the things that are currently coming into the house from grandparents, this is tricky. So I have just a couple of thoughts. My first thought is that if you are someone that's wanting to pursue a more intentional lifestyle, you have that conversation apart from the celebratory days. So, like, not around the holidays, not before, like, right before the birthdays. Have it at like a family dinner or at a different time, um, to where it's not as emotionally charged for them, and just say, this is what we kind of are thinking for moving forward for our family, like prioritizing experiences over the things. Shar, will you grab George, please? Grab George. Sorry, we have a dog that loves the people on the trail next to our house. Um, so like having that conversation beforehand, before it is emotionally charged, is really important. And then once they cross your boundaries, because of course that is going to happen. I have a few of those
Yeah.
people in my life as well. After you have that interaction where the gift is given, which is a lovely interaction, and that's what we're all searching for when we buy a gift. We all are looking for that moment of connection between one another where we exchange or just give a gift. And then it's mine to do what I will. What mine to do with what I will. I think I said that right. You know what I mean.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's so say it's like a teapot. I'm looking around my kitchen right now. Say it's a teapot and your mother-in-law comes over and she's like, "Where's that teapot?" And it's like, "Oh, I had so many teapots. Like that was such a lovely gift. I had so many and I ended up gifting it to my friend." Or you could lie. You could say, "I don't know where the teapot is." I don't recommend that. But truly,
Yeah.
that is not, this might be tough love. That's not your responsibility anymore. That's her emotions to deal with for herself. If that is something, like if number one, I would never go to someone's house and be like, "Where's that thing I bought you?" Um,
Yeah.
because it's not mine anymore. But those people do come across, you do come across those people. And I just think that it is their emotions to manage. And if it's maybe your husband's mother, then maybe push that on him and say, like, you're closer to your mother, like your mother than I am. You can have that conversation with her. But also just, I guess maybe that's the third thing. The second thing would be in those moments of celebratory days, give a gift list of saying like, this is what my kids want, this is what I want, like kind of doing the preparation for them, um as so that they're not buying off list, and kind of helps you
Hmm.
be more intentional with what you're getting. But again, I do think that we can't control other people. Some people's love language is gift giving, and so I don't
Right.
want to squash that in them, but it just, you have to be realistic with, now that this is mine, it's mine. It's not
Hmm.
yours to manage anymore. It's not your mother-in-law's to
Yeah.
come over and manage in your space.
Yeah, that's what I love about this whole conversation is that this is my space and I'm in charge of my space. And it's like a respect thing, it's a boundaries thing, but it's also like in order to love these other people, like we have to know where our own like triggers start, right? Where our
Yeah.
boundaries are. So we have to be firm but loving about that. But we also deserve to have an intentional space. We can't
Mhm.
like live our lives for other people's emotions to not be triggered, right? Like you said, that's their
Yeah.
stuff, not mine. So,
Yeah. And I'm saying,
um,
like, be gracious. Don't be, you don't have to be a
right,
jerk. You
right.
can say all of this with the utmost kindness and respect. But again, it, like, actually hearing you say that, like, this is my space, like thinking about going into anyone's house other than my own and trying to manage or dictate their space is like radical. That is crazy that people do that. Like, if
Yeah.
we just simply put it in that, those terms, it's like, that's pretty crazy that people think that they have ownership over the home that you're creating for your family. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's
I've
interesting
never
because
really thought
sometimes
about it
people
that way.
will. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people will buy you like, a picture for your wall. And it's like, well, that was nice, but like, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure this is going to match my
Yeah.
design or whatever. Right. And then it's
Yeah.
like this guilt thing, like, I've got to put this up somewhere.
Yeah.
Or well, how do I respond without offending them while at the same time not like lying to yourself about, what you want, what are
Mm-hmm.
you looking for creating?
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. Okay. So I'd love to dive into, since we are talking to mostly parents, when we're dealing with kids and helping them declutter their stuff, any strategies for supporting them in letting and kind of like the routine decluttering. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
painful for many parents, and some kids are more attached to certain things. But what are your thoughts around like supporting kids in kind of having a rotation cycle and letting go of their stuff,
Yeah.
emotionally and physically as well?
Yeah, so it's somewhat similar, but I would say those visual boundaries, like I said, that we have with the sentimental boxes, it's the same thing for my kids' room. So they have a certain amount of space in their room that they can store things. And then it's, once that room is gone, it's time to address the clutter that's in there. Because I also think this is important to do before birthdays and Christmas, of just going through the room, like, what don't you play anymore? And obviously with younger ages, you can kind of pull things out and not necessarily involve them as much. But
Uh-huh.
I feel like even with my daughter, I pointed out to her one day after we had, her room was like incredibly chaotic. She was 5 or 6 and we cleaned it. And I was like, look at how much space you have to play now. And her friend came over and they could just get around her room. It wasn't cluttered with stuff on the ground. And she, for some reason, that was a little light bulb to her to say, wow, I want to keep my room clean. And again, that's not every kid's story, but just kind of showing that difference between like, look at how you can exist and you can have a puzzle and then put it back up and then just not allow for the chaos to like overwhelm the room.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think about like existing in these spaces again, being our home, being our refuge from a crazy, chaotic world. Like this is what we have control over. So like, let's try and take control where we can find it because we have control over very little. But yeah, so the visual boundaries, and then something I do for birthdays. My dad, he will now take the kids out to breakfast and then they go pick out something at Target. And I used to want like control over what they could get at Target. I'm like, I don't want anything that's crazy colors or just seems worthless. But it's like that's their personal autonomy to say, like, I want to make this decision. And I don't want to take that from them because I never want any of this to backfire. I want them to see that this has been
Yeah.
a benefit to my life. It doesn't like harm the things that I want. And so again, they can keep what they want in the spaces that they want. But I think allowing that kind of give and take too, it's helpful of not just
Mhm.
being so rigid and you can't have this because I don't like this. Um, I just feel like allows them to get on board a little bit more.
Yeah. 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 I
Oh,
think you're
and then
right. Like
sorry,
you,
one more thing. I was going to say being generous when we do donate, like saying like there are kids that would want these at a cheaper price or just kind of like, and again, this is a like a be age appropriate, but you can say like we're going to donate this or give this and again gently use toy to kids that don't have the ability to get these things
mhm,
and like bring them in
mhm.
on that generosity.
Right, right. The generosity.
Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing that I've kind of done in my home, if it's something that can be sold for some value, like online or to the consignment store or something, I'll encourage my kids, like, well, if you guys want to make some extra money, go through your rooms and think about like what's something you don't really use anymore that you don't
Yeah.
play with. And if you don't want to just donate it, you can get some money out of it so you can buy something else that you do enjoy, because I'm not
Mhm.
against toys, but I want you to use them. It's kind of
Yeah.
like I'm not against telling you like you can't eat that stuff, but I need you to finish what you're putting on your plate, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't want to waste it, but you
Yeah.
can have as much as you want, like, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of work too with like the financials and teaching them managing money, like, and then
Oh,
the
yeah.
value of it, like how much does this cost? You spent the money on this, like, how hard it was to even get $10 for a toy, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what are you going to do with this $10 that you have? You're just going to spend it on something you're never going
On
to
some,
use, or
yeah.
yeah.
That's funny you say that. We were at this pumpkin patch last week and my daughter wanted this pig stuffed animal and it was 24.95. And her friend was like, "Charlotte, do you really want that? Or like do you love it or do you just kind of like it?" And Charlotte was like, "I just kind of like it." And she's like, "Then you don't want it." And I was like,
Mm,
wow, these 7-year-olds, oh, the one,
yeah.
the little girl's 8. The 8-year-old is capable of saying, like, of articulating that to her. And Charlotte made a good decision in not getting the pig because she's like, I don't really love this. I want things that I really love. So, okay. She loved it, but she didn't want to spend $20 peanut gallery.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No.
I think
Yeah.
that's cool too. Just like helping articulate these things that may seem like bigger concepts or kind of obscure to our kids. Like our kids can handle it. And I just think that they understand more than we give them credit for, or just
Yeah.
on those terms. Like, do I really want it or do I just kind of like it? It's like get the things you really
Hmm.
want, and you really love, quality over quantity.
Yeah. Right.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's teaching them like the intentionality of it as well, right? It's like, what
Yeah.
are you intentional about enjoying and playing with? What do you really want? And if
Yeah.
you're not so intentional about it, maybe it's something that can just go because it's taking up space. Like you said, things in our house we have to manage, not
Hmm.
just dust, right? At some point, but like move them around, and people pick up things and then they move them and now it's in the
Yeah.
wrong space. And now it's like you're chasing, especially the more children you have, the more people in your house, the more work it is to just put the things back where they go, like into
Yeah.
categories. And kids don't have, a fully developed prefrontal cortex. They don't have that fine-tuned organizational skill, and not even every temperament in adulthood is like that. So if
Hmm.
you're the organizer, it's like doing the work for five, six, however many people are in your house, right? It can be
Yeah.
exhausting.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
One other quick question with children. What I found happens with me sometimes, and I don't know if other parents can relate, is if I am decluttering quite a bit in certain spaces, then the kids will go into those spaces and they're kind of just like, I mean, at first they kind of lounge around, but then they're kind of like a little bored, which I'm fine with boredom. Creativity spurs out of boredom,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
then one of my kids once said, Well, when it's out of sight, it's out of my mind. So I can't, like, I don't know what to play with in this room because, and I'm like, you guys have all these toys. And they're like, well, if we can't see them, we can't play with them. So maybe, I don't know if you want to mention a little bit around like toy rotation
Yeah.
in like spaces, but keeping it still like minimalist and intentional, but also playful and allowing for that creative flow. And then do we like rotate that through, or I don't know. And I love that Montessori approach with
Yes.
children and creating more of a Montessori home so that children can engage in their environment, but not so much stuff that it's overwhelming. They don't do anything, or so
Yeah.
little that they're just kind of like, can I just watch TV because there's nothing else to do in this room?
Yeah, it's that decision fatigue for sure. Okay, a couple of thoughts that came to mind. So I used to do toy rotation. I don't do that anymore because I feel like we don't have as many toys. But I would say, if someone's listening to this and you haven't gone through and decluttered your kids' room in a while, like this is your sign, like it's time to do that. So I would say before buying any kind of like clear plastic bins or something that makes sure the toy is more accessible, first get rid of the things that you don't use and love. I think people oftentimes will go to the Container Store and they have all this like these big ideas of I'm going to reorganize my room, and it's like you're reorganizing clutter that doesn't need to be there. So then you're wasting money
Yeah.
and time and effort when you really should have just started with the decluttering. So first
Okay.
and foremost, declutter the spaces, declutter the toys. And then I think once you kind of have an idea of what you're going to use in the spaces, like displaying them and making them approachable for kids, um, absolutely. But also with that decision fatigue, there are definitely studies. I'm sorry, I can't cite them right now, but there are studies that say that when kids are overwhelmed with too many toys, they lose their attention span, can't
Yeah.
focus and just hone in. But if they have just a handful of toys, it's like, oh, and then also toys in regards to the Montessori approach, toys that can be for more than just one use. So if this toy is just like for one, um, like only does one thing, versus like some like
Yeah.
animated characters or the blocks or the magnetiles or the Legos, like multi-use,
Yeah.
multifunctional toys are probably better and beneficial, more beneficial than those obscure random toys. But yeah, I just think that first and foremost, you're decluttering that space so you can make it more accessible and approachable to kids. But toy rotation is great for people that don't know that what we're talking about. Just to summarize, what I used to do was just have in the closet, I would have the bins, and then maybe every couple of weeks I would pull those bins down and then swap them out. So it kind of just kept the toys more exciting to my kiddos. But I will say with toys, the toys are in my kids' rooms. I think if we did have like a dedicated playroom, that's where the toys would be. But just not overwhelming their sleep space either. Like, do not overwhelm
Mhm.
that space because I think it's kind of like for adults, like it's for intimacy and for sleep. Like, we don't need to overwhelm our bedrooms with a bunch of stuff that makes the end of our days kind of like that chaotic, anxious feeling that we don't necessarily need. Like, if you have a treadmill in there with all your clothes draped over it, it's a reminder of like, I'm not working out. I have a mess. Like, I'm not put together. Like, get it out, like start addressing these things. Sorry, I just kind of
Mhm.
wove to many different.
Yeah, no. Yeah, no, I think that's helpful reframes. Yeah. And I think starting with the kids stuff is probably not the best place. It's better to start with
Start with your own
your own
stuff.
stuff and then
Mhm.
your own sentimental stuff as well, because those toys are sentimental to the kids. And
Mhm.
if they're resisting and they're having a hard time, I think it's good for parents to experience that on themselves
Oh,
first, then
sure. Sure.
they can
Well, and you
relate a
can
little bit
say
more to
it.
kids.
Yeah, you can be like, a mommy's going through her stuff. I'm going to go through the things that I no longer do and just live by that, like set that example for them to live by. Because especially, I don't know, there are some kids that'll probably be like, oh, I want to do that too. What don't I use? I feel
Yeah.
like my daughter does that. My sons don't do that, but my daughter definitely does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just any kind of final words of maybe the benefits of doing this. Why should parents start? Like, what are the benefits? How will this help them
Mhm.
have more joy in their families? And yeah,
Yeah. So I would just say we definitely have, I don't feel like the overwhelm of always needing to be cleaning my house or with the flat surfaces in my home, having a lot of like tchotchkes, like the random things on the shelves that I'm needing to dust and take care of and manage. Just 3 quick little rules that I try and live by. A place for everything. Everything has a place. So everything in my home has some home in our house. And even if that's the junk drawer, which is right over here, I know that it goes there. And if it doesn't have a home, we kind of assess like, why is this here? Or find it at home or it's gone. So that was one thing. The 1 minute rule is a rule that I live by. So if it can be done in 1 minute or less, give or take, I do it right then and there. So dishes,
Uh-huh.
pulled the dog food out the other day. I dumped it in the bin and I wasn't going to take the bag to the trash can, but I was like, this is going to take me 10 seconds. I'm just going to go do that because all those
Yeah.
little things build up at the end of your day, at the end of your week, when you're tired and you don't want to do them, just get them done right then and there when you're able to. And that has saved me a lot of peace of mind. And then the third one is quality over quantity. I said that earlier in the episode, just investing in things of quality versus many sweaters at Target. I'm going to invest in a really nice one, whether that be a thrift store, Poshmark, or I buy it because I have the money to do so. And I'd rather have those classic staple pieces versus like spending all this money on Target and the trends. That's like a whole nother podcast of the way that they try and capture the comparison that we feel. So those 3 things. And then to kind of put a bow tie on something I said at the very beginning is that my encouragement is that you can live with less than you think. And a lot of this stuff seems overthought, I'm sure, on my part. But I think that once you start creating these little micro habits, it just becomes your life. Like it just creates a lifestyle. I'm not thinking about all these things anymore. It just is habit. And so I can
Mhm.
I can definitely attest from where I used to be and what I used to value versus now, the freedom of having fewer things to manage and to just kind of set myself up. Because again, I can't control the world. And so the things that I can take control over, it just gives you so much mental freedom in your home.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The mental freedom and the mental health improvements because we're
Yeah.
reducing stress, which is
Yeah.
always the most invisible burden on
Yeah.
everyone.
But it
So,
does. It gives you back time with your kids. It's just time. It gives you back time, like to do with what you want. And I
mhm.
don't want to spend time searching for things I can't find because I have too many things or I don't have a space for these things. Yeah, it just I want to be in control of my life, I guess, in those ways.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Amazing. Would you share a little bit about the resource you have for our audience today?
I think that I gave you, I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I give you? I think I gave you a freebie of just the various things that you can pull. Yes, that's what I gave you. The various things you
Uh-huh.
can pull out of each room in the house. I think that's what I gave
Okay.
you. And I think I
Yeah.
did give
We'll
you
link it below.
also, I'm
Mhm.
sorry, what'd you say?
We'll link it below as
Oh,
well, the
great.
link for
Okay.
everybody.
And then I
Mhm.
think as a part of that as well, there may be 10 reasons that you struggle to declutter, but if not, you can find that somewhere at Minimalist Moms, I'm sure.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think I gave
Yeah.
that to you as well.
Awesome. Sounds good. Yes. And we're definitely going to have your website and your podcast on here.
Great.
So anyone that's interested in learning more can check out your resources. But
Sorry,
yeah,
there's my dog again.
amazing. No problem.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope this was
Yeah.
helpful, people.
Yeah, it was. Thank you so much.